All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Roundtable, lucky number 113. We're back with another great panel, as always, being joined by D Style Boxing. And back with us again, Dangerous Dave from the 408. What's going on, everybody? I hope everyone's having a great day.
Great day.
Let's start it off, man. Let's just jump right into it. Tank Davis this past Saturday knocks out Hector Garcia in 9 rounds. Once again, Tank found himself in a fairly competitive fight, but the equalizer, the eraser, the left hand, or I think was it the right hand this time or was it the left hand? I can't remember.
It was both hands.
Yeah, I think he got him with both hands this time.
Yeah.
But yeah, he hurt Hector Garcia. Hector Garcia was complaining about some vision issues in the right eye and could not continue. He was a huge favorite as he was in his last couple opponents, and I know a lot of people criticize the level of opposition, but I want to get everyone's thoughts. We'll start with you, D-Style. What did you think of his performance? Was it impressive? Did he look better than you thought he would? Did he do what was expected? Go ahead.
I think the fight went like I thought it would go. I knew Garcia would because Garcia, look, people can say what they want about the odds or whatever, but he's not a pushover either. You know what I mean? He came to fight. He came determined. Saw that early in the fight, right? And Tank had to kind of take his time a little bit at first, figure him out a little bit, set him up for the big shots, like a pure puncher does, and that's what he did. Garcia was game. I think I don't like a lot of the criticisms he got that night from people calling him a quitter and stuff like that. I personally didn't like that because he showed his game throughout the night. But it reminds me of something Eric Morales said in the finale of his trilogy with Pacquiao, when he was sitting down against the ropes and was shaking his head. The interviewer asked him, like, is it that you couldn't get up, you couldn't continue? And Morales just said, you know what? Sometimes as a man, you just need to accept when you're defeated. Okay, and that's what he did. He just accepted defeat. And I think that's what Garcia did. I think he knew. He saw the writing on the wall. And I've known too many boxers that were too proud during fights and their careers were never the same. So it's more than just pride and winning. And this is a living for a lot of fighters, right? And you want Garcia to continue living. He's still a champion in his division. He still could get paydays and feed his family. He was already a beat man. There's no need to go out there and take unnecessary punishment just for the fans can say, man, this guy didn't quit. Oh, he went out in a shield. For what? Right? For what? At this point. So I just wanted to make a quick point about that. But as far as Tank always looks good. Like, my criticism about Tank has never been that he's not a good fighter. It's that he's a good fighter, and I want to see him fight all the other good fighters, all the other great fighters in the division. I want to see him test his elite skills against the other elite fighters in the division. That's all I want from Tank. Like, people twist that into, oh, you're hating. Oh, you're just hating on Tank. Oh, you don't want to see Tank succeed. No, it's not about that. And when I say it doesn't matter to me if Tank loses the fight, I mean that. Tank Davis is an exciting fighter to watch. He's the home run hitter, okay? He's the linebacker like LT was back in the day, laying on those quarterbacks. That's what he is. He's exciting to watch. He's Shaq in his prime, like breaking the rim. You know what I mean? That's what he is, like shattering the glass. That's Tank Davis, right? Of course, he's going to win a lot of these fights. He may not win some of them at the higher level, but I want to see Tank, up his game against the other top fighters in the sport. Okay, Garcia was a good fighter. I put this level of opponent kind of equal to Lomachenko's last win. So to be honest with you, so if I compare that, I think Tank, he did his thing. He got the stoppage, right? Okay, good for him. But I need to see him fight. Boxing is about hierarchy. I want to see him fight the Shakurs, the Haney's. Give me Kambozas, okay? Lomachenko. I need to see him fight those guys.
Okay, got you. Shout out to Nando Lamas with the $4.99 super chat. He said, salute everyone. Jab the like button. Thank you so much. All right. Dave, I mean, it seems like Tank Davis is under a microscope. A lot of people have high expectations for him. Was this the right opponent? Was this another guy that maybe wasn't up to the task in terms of, being that guy that's going to cause people to be impressed? What were your thoughts on the whole thing?
Well, my thoughts prior to the fight was that this was a very credible, ring-worthy opponent for Tank Davis. Finally, hey, yes, he's coming up in weight, but he's a world champion at 130 pounds, and he had one of the best upsets of the prior year in beating Chris Colbert. And I kept waiting to see the Hector Garcia that had that fire in his eye when he took out Chris Colbert, who was a shoe-in to be a world champion. I was waiting for that guy to show up. What happened to that? Tank Davis is a notoriously slow starter. He throws some of the least amount of punches per round for a titleist in his division, of something like 35 punches per round. And yet Hector Garcia couldn't capitalize on that early, which was a failure on his part. Even Mario Barrios and other fighters have gotten off and won early rounds against Tank Davis. So when I saw that slow start by him, I knew he was not going to go very far in the fight. It ended just as I expected, with a spectacular stoppage. Another exciting sold-out crowd for Tank Davis. What can you say? The guy sells tickets, man. He is a showman. He's a true showman in the sport of boxing. I think it's funny because D-Style, I got accused of being a hater too on Monday night, just for bringing up the fact that I'd like to see him pitted against some of the greatest young people in his division. Even hell, I don't care if they fight at 130. Hector Garcia is the world champion at 130 still. I would love to see him against the Lomachenkos, the Devin Haney, who holds all the titles. I think today he said Devin Haney, he had some words about Devin Haney. I want to see that. I want to see him fight the best in his division. Yes, I know he can probably knock out everybody else, but those guys bring something special to the table as well. Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney absolutely bring true tests to this young man.
Yeah. Calix, Tank's trainer before and after the fight said, "Hey man, when they gonna give my youngin his respect? When is he gonna get his respect? What does he got to do to get his respect?" So after this fight, does Tank Davis have Calix Boxing's respect? You're muted, sir.
It depends on what type of respect you're looking for. Just simply as a boxing fan who wants to see the best fighting the best, no. And by the way, I'm sure Tank's not out there worrying if he has Calix Boxing's respect, by the way. But if he were, no. As a consumer, this doesn't interest me. I've seen this a million times already. 16-1 favorite going in there, and you saw it in the 8th round, right? As soon as Hector Luis Garcia got hit, he made a business decision. Let's go back down to 130. And everybody was telling me before the fight, oh, yeah, 130. Calix, look at the pictures. They're the same weight. They're the same height. Hector's actually a little bigger than him in pictures. Weight classes exist for a reason. There's a reason Tank has settled in at 135. There's a reason Hector Luis Garcia has settled in at 130. He's a 130-pounder. He's a good – you try to explain this to people before the fight, and they say that you're hating. It's Hector Luis Garcia is a good fighter in a shallow division with a belt. He's a legit champion there, but it's a shallow division. He's got a belt. He's a good fighter, but he's stepping up a weight class and stepping up in competition at the same time, and that's the reason you had 16-1 odds. So, no, this doesn't do anything for me. This was a meaningless fight. There was nothing that we were going to learn from this fight that we didn't know before. We move on, and hopefully we get the Ryan Garcia fight next.
Gotcha. So let's talk about the other fight that's supposed to happen with Tank Davis with another Garcia. And this is supposed to happen April 15th. But then when you ask, Tank, and you ask Ryan, is this thing all set? No one's really given us a concrete answer in regards to this. But one thing that we do know, and I don't want to bore anyone with the list of charges that Tank's, he's being charged with, but there's some, some serious charges.
I say you should go over them.
Yeah. You want me to go over them?
Sure.
All right, why not?
There's people saying that we don't know. You don't know what's going
Yeah,
on.
I got the charges, and it's funny that you say that because I have people telling me, "Oh, well, how do you know he was even driving the car?" Well, let's read these charges, and if he wasn't driving the car, then why is he being charged with these charges? Let me see if I can get these pulled up here. Give me 1 second. So here's a list of the charges. Right, he's being charged with 4 counts of failure to immediately return to remain at the scene of an accident involving bodily injury, and that carries 1 year in jail. Then he's got another count here with 1 count of failure of the driver involved in an accident to render reasonable assistance to an injured person. That's 60 days. 1 count of failure of a vehicle driver involved in an accident to furnish required ID and license. That's 60 days. 1 count of failure of vehicle driver involved in an accident to exhibit license to police. That's another 60 days. 1 count of failure of vehicle driver involved in an accident to report to the nearest police. That's 60 days. 1 count of failure of vehicle driver in an accident to locate, also notifying the owner of unintended property of damage. That's another 60 days. 1 count of failure of vehicle driver in an accident to furnish required ID information in writing on untended vehicle property. That's another 60 days. 1 count of the person driving a motor vehicle on a highway on a suspended license and privilege. That's 1 year.
Jesus.
1 count of the person driving a motor vehicle on a highway with revoked license and privilege. That's another year. 1 count of driving a motor vehicle on the highway without required license and authorization. That's 60 days. 1 count of the driver failing to stop at a steady circular red signal. So that's a lot of counts there, right? And if he wasn't driving the vehicle, then why is he being charged, with those charges? That's number one. And number two, there was a camera at a nearby convenience store that caught everything, right? And he tried to strike a plea deal. His counsel tried to strike a plea deal with the judge and the prosecutor, and the judge is like, no, right? He was supposed to go back to court in December. Then they had a continuance. Now I believe he's going back to court February 16th, right? So all things indicate to me that this judge does not want to go easy on him, that this judge wants to sentence this guy to some type of jail time. So I am going to go around the panel, and let's be objective as possible. What are the chances? I'm going to put a percentage on this. What are the chances Tank Davis fights Ryan Garcia April 15th? I'm going to just start off real quick and say I'm giving it a 0 chance, but we'll go with you, Calix. What chance do you?
It can't be 0.
I'll give it a -5. But go ahead, Calix.
I really don't know, man. I don't know how to put a number. I have no expertise on the law, none. Thankfully, I've never had to go to court for anything, except for a speeding ticket that they knocked down to a seatbelt. But I don't know, man. I have no idea. I'm conditioned to think that celebrities, athletes who have a ton of money to throw at lawyers and have something going for themselves in the near future will somehow get out of it. I'm just conditioned to think that way from what I've seen in the past. So I got to give it more than -5. That's for sure. So I don't know, the fact that none of the parties involved are promoting this thing yet, right? Because it's April and it's January now. So we're only 3 months away. They're not actively promoting it yet. Means that they know that there's one more hurdle they have to get over, and it's a serious hurdle. So I would say 50-50. I would give it 50-50 because, Beeb, I've just seen too many athletes, too many celebrities get out of stuff like this. I've seen too much of it.
Real quick rebuttal to that, though. What about Floyd? He went away for 60 days. He did significantly less than what Tank did. And here's another thing I forgot to tell you. Let me add this in there. That assault, the domestic violence case, still open. The prosecutor wants to go ahead with that. There's enough evidence to go ahead with that, even with her so conveniently saying that it didn't happen. We don't know how the bloody lip got there. Maybe she slipped and fell in the shower. I don't know. I don't want to cast aspersions here, but
yeah. And by the way, before we go further with this little discussion, for the people out there trying to contrast Tank and Dana, and I'm with everybody else. Dana, it seems like he's been getting more criticism, but there's actually like a better comparison that is recent. And that's Texas's basketball coach who he was making $6-7 million a year. And he had the same exact situation as Tank Davis, same exact, that this happened around December. And his wife said he beat her. Then a couple days later, she retracted and said, didn't happen. I messed up. It didn't happen. And guess what? Texas fired him. He lost all of his money. So for people who want to make comparisons, that's a better comparison to make. I'm just throwing it out there. Lost his job, lost millions of dollars. He's unemployed.
All right, Dave, you really don't have to be Judge Judy to figure this one out. What are your thoughts?
Well, I still think regardless, I'm here in California, but regardless of where you are in the U.S., there's two judicial systems. There's one for people who can afford the finest attorneys they can hire, and there's one that have to use the public's attorneys. And I don't think that the criminal trial is going to impede the April date that they're working on. I don't think that's going to be it at all. I think his attorneys will be able to say this is his livelihood. They'll be able to push sentencing court dates into the future. And I am convinced he'll do time. Who knows how much time he'll do. I got a friend who had pretty serious charges and hired the best attorneys he could in California. He was still sentenced to a year. But he was giving ample time to turn himself in for his sentencing. Was very far away from the actual court date. I think, if anything, if the fight falls apart, it's going to be because of contractual terms between him and Ryan Garcia, or a potential injury in camp to Ryan Garcia or something of the like, because April's right around the corner, and they have yet to even secure a date, a real date in a venue in Las Vegas. So I give it a 50-50 odds of happening in April.
So what you're saying, Dave, is even if he does get sentenced, the sentence won't start for a while, and he'll be able to fight in the meantime. In other words,
yeah, I firmly believe that they'll be able to push the sentencing, turn him when he has to actually turn himself in to do the time into the future. And shoot, if you could be tried for the unfortunate case with his partner for domestic violence, he should get tried for that all at once. If I was him, I know that's not possible, but if he's going to do jail time, he should do it all at once. I do believe he will be doing jail time, but celebrities and athletes, they get treated differently than regular people. I don't think he'll be serving the entirety of the sentence at all.
Yeah. D-Style, if Dave made a good point, and let's kind of piggyback off that a little bit. When Floyd did get sentenced, he was able to squeeze that, I believe, that Cotto fight in, and then he was sentenced. Do you think something like that will similarly happen here, or do you think that this fight is just going to be scrapped? I'm giving it zero chance, but what are you going to give it?
I'm torn because it's funny. His own friend Ali Setback even said in his post when he was defending Tank, he said, with all pro athletes, we know they'll, wipe it under the rug. And he made that sound like that's okay or something, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what people are expecting. People are expecting, and myself included, that this is just kind of like, and I know it's hard to imagine, but it might just go away. They might just work something out. They may just give him a slap in the wrist. Is how I'm feeling. They might give him a lot of probation time or something. He might do a couple days in jail or something. They may postpone it. I'm not sure. I don't want to get I don't have a crystal ball to know. I don't know. I'm just not sure, because if this was me, if this was Calix or 408, anybody in the chat, we'd be in jail right now. Like forget waiting for a trial.
We'd be walking the yard right now. We'd be walking the yard.
Dude, I'd be like cleaning the fields right now, right here in
Walking
I-10.
the yard, baby.
I'd be cutting weeds at the I-10 with the fucking sheriff watching over me and shit. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like that's where I would be. Like, you know what I mean? I'd be tatted up like with the pen and shit. Like, you know what I mean?
Fighting off the bloods, man. We'd be fighting off the bloods.
I'd be sharpening my blade like on the fence and shit. Like, well, you know, that's where I would be.
All right, take it easy. Let's not get carried away.
Ladies and gentlemen, the reality is, like Floyd said, that there's two tiers to the justice system. Whether we like it or we don't, there just is. All right? Now, here's the thing. With that said, you even said about Floyd at the time, Tyson at the time, right? In those cases, their fame kind of worked against them because the spotlight was on them and the judges knew people were watching. And so it's a little different, but I just don't think, and a lot of boxing fans are going to like hearing this, but Tank isn't a big enough name for the spotlight to be on a judge like that. Like only boxing fans are paying attention to this. This didn't exactly make SportsCenter, okay? Like if LeBron James would have done this and walked away from the scene, that shit would have been wall to wall coverage on ESPN, Fox News, CNN, okay, ESPN included. But since it's Tank Davis in a niche sport like boxing, the spotlight just isn't there. Floyd was bigger than boxing in a way as far as name value, so people were paying attention to that case. Tyson was a huge name, so people were paying attention to that case. Even though I don't think Tyson did it, but that's a different story. I'm just saying I think Tank, it's not a big enough name for the spotlight to be on the judge, to pressure the judge to do the right thing. That's what I'm saying. You know what I mean? I think he's going to get away with it, B. I think he's going to walk free. Now, but let me answer your question, though. Even if Tank was squeaky clean, had a clean record, was a good Samaritan, and never got in trouble, I still never thought this fight was going to happen. Like, I'm just putting it out there. This is just, like, I don't think the fight's going to happen next year. Because not only do we have this Tank situation looming, right? It's I just don't believe Lion Ryan. I don't believe Tank and his peeps. I don't think Golden Boy and PBC are going to work together. I just don't see it happening. It's too many hurdles for this to happen. I'm sorry. I think they're doing it because it gets their names in the headline. People start talking about them. By headlines, I mean boxing scene. They don't exactly get on ESPN headlines. You know what I mean? They don't make CNN or something. Okay, but you know, boxing scene headline. All right? And that's that. I don't think Tank's going to get in trouble that way. They're going to do some, but it's going to be a slap in the wrist. But I don't think the fight happens next year. Not necessarily because Tank's going to prison.
But you need to clarify that when you say hurdles, you mean perceived hurdles, because none of these are actual hurdles. These are all fights.
Like these are made up hurdles, obviously. You know what I mean? I used to say this, right? When we did shows with him, Bob Arum and Don King hated each other, but their love for money made them work together, right?
Yep.
But that's just not the case today for whatever reason. So there's too many incentives to not work together. Right.
I'm just old enough, Batista, I'm old enough to remember when, and I was young, I didn't exactly knew what happened till later on, but OJ literally decapitated the mother of his children with his.
We don't know that, Alex. We don't know that. We don't know.
Sleeping in the house, and then the friend walks up and he decapitates him as well, and then he gets a great lawyer who says if the glove doesn't fit, you must quit, and then they quit. It's like allegedly, right? So what I'm saying is OJ, the mother of OJ's children, the killer is still walking out there somewhere if OJ didn't do it, right? So where is that person? But what I'm saying is I've seen this too many times. I don't want to compare those two things, obviously, but I've seen this two-tier justice system work too many times in which the athlete, the celebrity, just they find a way.
Let me tell you something, man. If that was me, I would be turning this thing into a shank right now in the prison. Right?
Do you think that they'd let us do the roundtable from a jail cell. Like, would they let us bring like a laptop, or we could do it from us with a cell phone or something? We could do a roundtable.
You could do stuff like that now, like, but you got to pay for it, right? So we would need our supporters over here to help out. Like, we would really need super chats. We would do that.
Super chats can make that possible.
Straight from the Shawshank, right?
Shawshank. But with the correction facility, it's going to get like 50%. So we're going to get like 20% of it.
So you think that the fight can still be doable? Because Dave did make a good point. Like the sentence could be immediate, or they could give him some leeway. With Floyd, they gave him leeway because I guess the excuse was, he's bringing a lot of revenue to Las Vegas, and we don't want to hurt that. A lot of people are depending on that revenue, and now all of a sudden, if we pull the fight, we're hurting Las Vegas. We don't want to do that. But like you said, I mean, he's not Floyd Mayweather, right? So like this judge seems to have it in for him, right? So I'm wondering if she'll just be like, no, we're not going to let you fight. We're gonna do. Why should you get a chance to make a living here? Why should you be rewarded for this, right? Because the judge was really pissed off because of the victim's testimony, the victim that had to get her gallbladder removed because of the extent of the injury she suffered in that car accident. Judge was not happy with this guy. So I don't know, man. I don't think this fight's going to happen. And I think he's going away. I think he's going away for at least 6 months, maybe a year.
You know what the wild card? You know what the wild card here is, and what doesn't add up is, and I dropped a video about it yesterday about the surplus of the surplus of pay-per-views, pay-per-view extravaganza is Plant versus Benavidez in March, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pay-per-view. Arrow versus Keith in April, pay-per-view. Deontay versus Andy Ruiz in April, pay-per-view. And now they're going to do Tank versus Ryan in April on a pay-per-view. So are you telling me PBC is going to do 4 pay-per-views in 6 weeks? Is that what you're telling me? Is that what I'm supposed to believe? Is there precedent for a single boxing outfit doing 4 pay-per-views in a 5 to 6, maybe 7 week period? Is there precedent for that? So I'm supposed to believe that all of this is going to come off, and during a recession, non-recession, they're going to be pay-per-viewing people to death in March and April, the same outfit. So I can't really believe that all these fights are going to happen in that short period of time. It's weird.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense, man. I just don't see it happening, if I'm being honest. Just don't see it happening.
Beeb, you made a great point about the judge and which way the judge might go. I think it'd be interesting if the judge comes down hard and says, well, I can agree to make you make a living, so therefore you can fight here in this state. And what would Ryan Garcia and Oscar De La Hoya say when he has to fight in Tank's backyard? Will they go ahead and fight in Tank's backyard where Ryan Garcia doesn't have a fan base, perhaps, or people aren't willing to travel to support him, and the entire stadium is just filled with Tank Davis supporters? Would that be a catalyst to stop the fight in April?
Yeah, that's the thing. I just think that there's just too much hanging over Tank's head, and I think enough is enough. I think he's kind of, exercised all his get out of jail free cards. He's already paid settlements out in other incidences, and I just think that they're going to make a statement this time. They're not going to cut him any slack or give him any leeway this time around, in my opinion. That's just how I see it. But I could be wrong. But I'm giving him a 0 chance for this fight happening. I just got to be honest. If I was to do a line on this, I would make this probably a negative infinity on the chances of this fight.
Oh, you mean betting line? I thought you were talking about some other type of lines.
Please, this is a family show. We can't talk
about I was waiting for you to bust out with the mirror and a razor blade.
We don't do stuff like that. Come on. We don't do that.
Come on over here.
All right, so let's talk about
if I were to do a line on this, you'd be high. All right, let's go.
Please. Compose yourself a little bit here. Come on. All right, so let's talk about the co-feature here with Boots Ennis, right? Because he's facing a shit ton of criticism online. He went 12 rounds with Karen Chukhadzhian, right? And it was kind of a whitewash, but I heard someone say that they thought the fight was close and competitive. I don't know. I couldn't find rounds to give Chukhadzhian to be honest with you. I thought it was kind of like, to me, it looked like Boots was just in there trying to like work on things. He fought the whole fight southpaw. He was kind of like stepping back, trying to counterpunch it. It looked like, I hate to say this, a glorified sparring session. And I've never been a big fan of fighters like doing that. When you look at a guy like Crawford, doesn't matter who he's in there with. He's gonna get them out of there. He's not gonna play around with anyone. He's not a guy that plays with his food. He just takes care of business. But in this performance, I got the sense that Ennis had a different mindset going in. Based off of what you guys saw this past Saturday, does this change your opinion on how Boots would do against a Crawford and a Spence? And do you think that he's ready for those guys? We'll start with you, Calix. Go ahead.
No, I think it was an off night for him, and I kind of disagree with you. I think he was frustrated.
Okay.
Yes, he might have went in thinking I'm going to work on some things, but towards the end of the fight, 8th, 9th, 10th round, especially when the crowd started booing him mercilessly, the crowd that was cheering him going in, he started to get frustrated. His corner started to get frustrated. Whether he won 12-0 or 8-4, it doesn't really matter. He went the distance with a guy that he was minus 1,000 favored to stop. Minus 4,000 favored against, minus 1,000 for the stop. 10-1 favorite to stop this guy. He didn't get the stoppage. So it was an underwhelming performance. There's no way to like dance around this. It was an underwhelming performance. But boxing is littered with guys who give us underwhelming performances in the past. That's not a big deal. The red flag here is you have a guy fighting once per year. And when guys are now fighting once per year, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't come out once per year and enjoy your high minimums, enjoy fighting once per year and being a part-time fighter and still making 7 figures and say, whoa, don't judge me too hard. When you have guys on Boxing Twitter, on the YTBC, calling this guy the best pure welterweight since Ray Leonard, one of the best pound-for-pound talents we've seen since Roy Jones, the guy just glides through the ring. He doesn't even step when he's in the ring. He just floats. You know, when you have all of that, you set the curve to grade this guy on. And when you set that high of a curve, don't get mad when people say this is a terrible performance, even though the guy arguably won 120-108. He's a 10-1 favorite to stop this guy. He did not stop this guy. So if you ask me, does it change my mind? Though, no, because I wasn't as high as those people coming in. I'm still high. I think he's a very good fighter, talented fighter, and he has the potential to be a great fighter, maybe even a special fighter, all of those things. But I had him 5 coming in, 5 or 6 in the division coming in, and I have him right around the same now. I think I would still pick Bud over him. I would still pick Errol over him. I think Virgil is toss-up fight. I think his fight with Virgil is a toss-up fight. So I think he's right there between 3 and 5 in a division that just isn't doing much. It's still a deadlocked division. Nothing going on in this division. A lot of talent, but none of it being realized right now.
Gotcha. So D-Star, do you think some of the glitter came off of Boots Ennis after watching him this past Saturday night?
Well, it depends who you ask. If you ask the people that had him on top 5 pound for pound over all the proven champions in the sport, like, sure. If you ask people that were saying things like, he go in there, he destroy Virgil 4 rounds tops, like people like that, people that compared him to Ray Leonard and he's the next Floyd, the people that were suffering from anointment syndrome, that were giving this guy all the accolades before he proved it because their eye test isn't going to lie. If you ask those people, sure. Okay, fine. But if you ask me, no, he's still Boots Ennis. He's still a good fighter. He's still a fighter that's getting better, that's improving. This fight's going to be a learning experience for him. There are fighters in the sport that go in there and their whole objective is to either survive or make it look ugly. That's what they do, right? And we may not like those fighters, but those fighters they play a role. There's a purpose for them.
Sure.
And they do help these fighters improve to deal with those things and with those frustrations. And I think this fight in the long run did more for Boots than all those first round knockouts did. Okay. They're going to do more for him as a fighter to improve him as a fighter, but that's what he is. He's a top contender at the moment, but he's at the same time hasn't, for as much talk and hype as he gets, they haven't taken that leap of faith with him yet. They just haven't. When are they going to take that leap with him? Okay, maybe Spence doesn't want to fight him, right? Maybe, whatever. But there's other fighters in PBC he could fight, and they never put, like, they could have, Al Haymon could have told Danny Garcia, look, you got to fight this kid. They never did, right? They could have made plenty. They could have made Keith Thurman fight him. Keith, you're not who you once were. You want a title shot, beat this young lion, and then you could justify getting your title shot again. No, they just not even a title shot. We'll talk about that later, but let's have you fight Spence anyway. Boots could have had fights that could have propelled him a little bit. Didn't. It is what it is, and he is where he is, okay? Boots is not a proven fighter. Boots has more to show us, and we just don't know when he takes that leap of faith. He may pass with flying colors. I believe he will, but we don't know till he does it. And there's a thing called the halo effect. You're going to look better against a certain level of opposition. Okay, when there's more resistance coming your way, when you start fighting guys that are there to win, when you start fighting guys that are there to hit you back, when you have guys that are not discouraged round after round, because even though you're beating them, but they're still coming at you. We saw what happened with Villa in the Villa fight, right? They could come back and it could bite you in the ass. We don't know what will happen. So for me, I take it for what it is. I am agnostic when it comes to Boots. Okay, I am open to the possibilities of him being a great fighter, but he has not proven it yet. And in the sport of boxing, I don't just anoint people before they prove it. Okay, he hasn't proven anything yet. All right, so I am not shocked that a tricky fighter like this, frustrated him a little bit, and it is what it is. So there you go. Shout out to Haplotype.
Dave, what are your thoughts, man? Did you think that maybe Boots was trying new things, or do you agree with Calix that maybe he was just off?
I think he was frustrated. I'm going to agree with Calix on that. He went 12 rounds and he's getting criticized this week. But every so often, you're going to run into these Sandor Martin types that are going to come in to play spoiler. Unfortunately, I think his stock dropped after the fight a bit because now in the public eye, he was brought in as the co-main with this reputation of being a knockout artist. And all of a sudden, he doesn't get the KO against a relatively unknown, ranked number 10 IBF guy. But let's give credit to that guy, man. He's got some ring IQ and he's got a granite chin. There aren't too many guys who haven't been knocked out by Gervonta Tank Davis. Pitbull Cruz, his star power rose a little bit. And so this guy should get more opportunity in the U.S. and he deserves it, rightfully so, for playing spoiler and making Boots Ennis look subpar. Do I think less of Boots Ennis's potential? No, I don't. I think him and Virgil Ortiz are still the future of the welterweight division. But you can't discount these guys that come in from the Eastern European region, man. They're tough as hell. Stanionis went 12 rounds against Butaev. Did we, bash Stanionis for going 12 rounds against Butaev and giving a good fight? No. But I do believe that his stock has dropped a little bit. He's having a difficult time getting star power, and this is going to hurt his chances of getting the big name opponents.
I got two quick questions about Boots, right? And I'm gonna kind of add Virgil Ortiz into this as well. Do you think that Boots, do you think actually that Virgil Ortiz, if he was in there with Chukhadzhian, do you think he would have stopped him? Do you think Chukhadzhian would have been able to go 12 with Virgil Ortiz with the way he fights, the way he cuts off the ring, just the constant pressure? Because Boots is a little bit of a different style than Virgil. I would venture to say that Virgil's a little bit more offensive-minded, right? So how do you think Virgil would have done with this opponent? Think it would have went 12? We'll start with you, Dave.
Yeah, I've seen Virgil make improvements on cutting off the ring substantially, and I think that might be the one area now that we all know that Boots is going to have to work on, especially when you run into these slick fighters. I think Virgil Ortiz would have done better if not secured the stoppage on Saturday night against this Karen.
Question number 2, right back at you, Dave, before I go over to Calix. Who do you think gets a title shot first, Vergil Ortiz or Boots Ennis? Who do you think will get maneuvered into a title shot quicker?
Virgil Ortiz.
I think so too. We'll go with Calix. What do you think of those two questions I asked Dave? What's your take on that?
The first question, I don't think it matters. I do think he would stop him, but I don't think it matters because the triangle theory doesn't work. So it's not going to tell us anything. You know, we can't say, oh, just because he beats this Karen guy by stoppage, as opposed to going the distance, that he's a better fighter. It just doesn't work that way. So I think he would stop him. I just don't think that tells us anything. And I seem to think that he's going to leverage himself into a legit title shot at 147 before Boots. I think he's going to end up in a better position. He's got this Reggie that he's going to likely get. Whether the Stanionis fight happens in April or not, I don't know. But I think he's going to get this Reggie at some point this year and leverage that into a real title fight. And the big question I have with the division, though, is it's held up right now by Errol Spence with the 154 move. It's what's going to happen to these 3 belts. Is it going to be stripped? Is it going to be forced to vacate? To me, these belts, we need movement in this division. I think these 3 belts need to be off of Errol Spence's waist if this is the move he's going to make, and give these younger lions their opportunity.
Okay. Want to welcome the editor-in-chief of ringtv.com, Dougie Fisher, one of the old school vets of the online boxing game. Dougie, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good. Thanks for waiting for me.
No problema. So we were just talking about Boots' performance over Karen Chukhadzhian, and I wanted to ask you, what did you think of that performance? And does it change your mind a little bit about Boots? Because obviously this guy has been highly touted, and he's supposed to be the next heir apparent in the welterweight division, right? So do you think after this performance, this changes anything? Do you think he has a shot against Spence and Crawford? Does it change your mind? Or I don't know what your opinion was before, but after this fight, has it changed your mind a little bit about him?
Well, I mean, I never viewed Boots as like an elite level boxer because he hasn't proved it yet, right? So, I mean, you see some fans and even some media, they'll share their pound for pound list with you, and they'll have Ennis in there. And I've never shared that opinion. He hasn't even fought a world-class puncher yet. So I view him for what he is. He's a sensational talent. He was a very busy fighter for the first 2 or 3 years of his career. And I think that was good for him. I know he's dedicated. I know he's got pedigree, comes from a boxing family. He's practically grown up in the gym, Philadelphia gym scene, gym culture at that. I mean, he looks like the total package, but I don't know if he is the total package. I view him as a top young contender. I think he's done enough. He's faced enough solid fighters to prove that he's a legitimate contender, and I think he's legitimately top 5. And Ring Magazine ranks him number 3, so that tells you. And I do believe part of that ranking is the eye test, which it's unreliable. You know what I mean? And you know, I can give you a dozen examples just in the welterweight division where a fighter seemingly had all of the tools, had a great amateur career. Let's go back to the mid 80s with Mark Breland, right? All-time great amateur boxer, Pan American and Olympic gold medalist. You know, he was the toast of New York City. I would say in 1985 and even 1986, after Mike Tyson won his first world title, right? I would say in New York City, Mark Breland was more celebrated than even Mike Tyson. Like, he was that big. Like, Mark Breland was, according to many respected journalists and boxing insiders, Breland was the next Sugar Ray Robinson, right? And obviously that didn't pan out, you know, like he did have a lot of tools. He was a sensational, once in a lifetime talent as an amateur, and he was a great talent as a professional. But one thing we hadn't seen, you know, during his developmental stage before he fought for a legitimate world title, we hadn't seen his chin tested. and it took a smart, grizzled, and crafty veteran in Marlon Starling to let us know what his chin was made of. And I'm not saying that Boots doesn't have a good chin. I suspect that he does have a good chin. But what I'm saying is we haven't really seen him in there with a true world-class puncher. And prior to this past Saturday, we hadn't seen him in there with a stick and move specialist or somebody, a fighter with the talent to survive. And that's what he was faced with. And I was underwhelmed by his performance because I thought he took sort of a nonchalant attitude in walking down Kachuk. How do you pronounce his last name?
Chukhadzhian.
Chukhadzhian.
Yeah, I had to use a speaking speller to try to learn how to pronounce that.
Yeah. So it does, but it doesn't. I mean, I view him as a top contender, just like I view Stanionis and Ortiz as top, undefeated young contenders. Guys who are in their mid, or early to mid 20s. I would say Ortiz is a little more battle tested. I think he's been tested with a wider variety of styles and strengths. Doesn't mean I think that Ortiz would beat Ennis. Doesn't mean that I think Ortiz necessarily is better than Ennis or should necessarily be rated higher than Ennis. I understand the excitement around Boots Ennis, but he's still a work in progress. And I think the learning curve, I mean, what we did learn is that he can go 12. Obviously, he can pace himself. I thought maybe he paced himself a little too well. And I do think this, and I could be wrong, but I thought that he was a little overconfident coming into this fight. When I was watching interviews with him and reading, stories where he was interviewed, and he was talking about being Mike Tyson. And he was kind of, I got the feeling, and I could be wrong, but I got the feeling that he expected to walk in there, hit this guy once or twice, and the guy would drop. And it didn't happen. And I think he tried to make some adjustments, but there wasn't a sense of urgency during the fight. And I'll say this, I was bored. I was bored by the fight. I'm not going to hold it against him because generally speaking, he is entertaining. He is exciting. But to me, he didn't deliver. And but that doesn't mean, to me, his stature doesn't drop off of this performance because when a fighter is, especially an offense-minded fighter, is faced with an opponent that takes a survival mode that is a stick and move specialist and is going to do more moving than sticking, it doesn't matter how good you are. It's hard to look good against those guys. I didn't think Naoya Inoue looked great against Paul Butler. Now Inoue did what an elite boxer does. He finds a way. He steps up the gear. He changes tactics enough to where he can land the money shot, the punch that ends the fight. But it took a great fighter like Inoue till the 11th round. And I think Paul Butler is a better fighter than Kachuk. But it's hard to look good against a fighter. And I don't care how good you are as a boxer. I think Floyd Mayweather stayed away from stick and movers. I don't think Floyd Mayweather would have looked good against Erislandy Lara. You know what I mean? Or if he had ever fought, who's the other Cuban standout that was more his weight class?
Casamayor.
Casamayor. I think they knew it. I mean, I'm not saying that Casamayor would have beat Floyd Mayweather, but I do know that Floyd Mayweather's father is savvy enough, and Floyd himself has a matchmaker's mind where they can look at Casamayor's style and say, like, that's going to be an ugly fight. They definitely welcomed a stationary fighter. Somebody's going to stand in front of you, or somebody's that's going to apply pressure. They're going to look better against that kind of style than somebody who's going to stick and move and knows what to do and can get ugly and rough you up on the inside, or somebody that really just sticks to that amateur stick and move style like an Erislandy Lara. So I don't hold it against Boots that much, but I'll admit this: I was underwhelmed. I expected a little bit more.
So you made a statement about how you believe that Ortiz is more battle tested, and I think that's That's pretty evident, I think, when you look at the resume.
100%.
I think it's a fair statement. So, do you think that, or like I asked the rest of the guys, do you think Ortiz will get maneuvered into a title shot quicker than Ennis?
Yeah. I mean, if you count the secondary WBA title, I don't know if it's going to come against Stanionis. I don't know how quickly they can reschedule that fight. Like Ortiz's manager, Rick Meridian, I'm kind of skeptical that Stanionis can fully recover within a month after having a surgery like that. But let's see what happens. I don't think Team Ortiz wants to wait around for Stanionis, though. Having said that, though, I know that Golden Boy had to come out of the pocket, and they had the support of their platform, DAZN. And that's the fight DAZN wants. The Zone wants the biggest fights possible. So who knows? Maybe DAZN it doesn't get behind Ortiz not fighting Stanionis next. In that case, maybe they do have to wait maybe until May. That would suck. I think young fighters need to fight.
Yeah.
And that goes for Boots. I think Boots needs to fight. I mean, all of them. Stanionis he's put his frustration and his discontent out there in social media, how he's wanted to stay active. I know his trainer, Marvin Somodio, pretty well. And if you talk to any of the trainers, they lament that more than anybody. They lament it more than the fighters that boxers aren't as active as they have been in previous decades. So I know that's what the managers and the trainers of all of these young fighters, they want these guys to fight more often. So I think if it's up to Ortiz and his management, he comes back as soon as possible, whether it's against Stanionis or not. But I don't know if a regular WBA title or an interim WBA title would be on the line if he was to come back as quick as he wants to come back.
Yeah. Okay. So Demetrius Andrade came back, and it was kind of another similar type performance, that Boots had. A lot of people weren't impressed with that. But, obviously it looks like the plan was to get his feet wet with the PBC so he can get lined up for a fight against Jermall Charlo or the Plant-Benavidez winner. I'm going to go over to you, D-Star, with this one. Do you think that by the end of the year, Andre will finally get one of those big fights that he's been longing for the longest time?
I'm just waiting for Andre to fight somebody that he's not a 1,000-1 or more favorite over. That's the first thing I'm waiting for. The second thing I'm waiting for is for him to take what's on the table, right? Like at some point, he's got to blame himself a little bit, right? I know he paints himself as being avoided, being a boogeyman, and no one's saying that stuff doesn't happen in boxing. Of course, fighters avoid fights sometimes. It is what it is. But if I'm not mistaken, I think his best win is Vanes from years ago. At some point, you have to show us that you really want to fight. At some point, and I don't mean just talking. I don't mean just interviews on the internet. I'm talking about just give an offer to a fighter that they just can't refuse, right? Back up. If you're that confident, at some point you got to back up a Charlo in the corner and say, "Look, I'll take the same amount of money your previous opponent took," and you leave them in a position where they have no choice but to kind of say yes or just look like they're ducking you, right?
That's what Dimitri Bivol did with Team Canelo.
There you go. He
did not price himself out,
And look how it paid off.
Whatever they offered.
Exactly. And look how it paid off. That's the thing, right? If you're confident in your talent, something tells me you're not that confident, because I'm not even talking okay, I understand there's Canelo, the Charlo brothers, Gennady Golovkin. I understand there's those guys, right? And then there's this whole I don't know if you guys ever driven an I-10 from El Paso to Phoenix. When you drive through New Mexico, there's nothing but desert, okay?
Yeah.
There's this whole open field of fighters that he's not fighting. There's that middle gap between him being a 2,500 favorite and Canelo. There's that middle gap of fighters he's not fighting.
Excellent point. Excellent.
So
point.
That's there's too much of a gap there. Way too big. This is crazy. So I'm gonna say no. I just don't believe it. I don't think, and I don't believe he's gonna fight anybody this year. I'm gonna be pessimistic, and his pattern has not shown me. Like, he needs to show me that he's gonna do it. That's what I'm gonna say.
You don't think this could be the big year for Demetrius Andrade, man? This breakout year. You don't think
I think that
happen?
there's a decent shot that Jermall fight happens, and I think that's a great fight. They both need each other. Like, you know what I mean? Like peanut butter and jelly, they need each other, right? But will it happen? I'm not sure.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Calix, you're a betting man, right? If you were to put a line on this one, what are the chances of Demetrius Andrade getting that signature fight against the Charlo or the Plant-Benavidez winner? You're on mute, sir. His microphone's muted.
Oh, I've spoken about this ad nauseum, so I'll be real quick. If you look at Boo Andrade's betting odds history, it's embarrassing. It's one of the most embarrassing things you'll ever see in boxing. 33-1 favorite, 20-1 favorite, 15-1 favorite. He's had 3 fights, I believe, in the past decade, if I'm looking at this correctly, where he's been underneath a 10-1 favorite. This is embarrassing. And you have a whole bunch of guys around 168 who've been waiting around for that Caleb Plant payday to fall in their lap, that cash out fight. That's what this is. Yeah. Jermall Charlo he's fought once in the past 840 days. I think it's up to now.
Well, you even counted the days, Calix.
What are these guys doing? What are they doing, though, Beef? It's like they want something to fight. They want Canelo payday to fall in their lap. So for Boo Andre, if you're asking me do I think something is going to happen? He's with the PBC now. I think eventually he'll get his fight, get a couple million, and go off into the sunset. But for me as a boxing fan, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I know this is heading nowhere. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. Dougie, I think I know what you're going to say.
I don't think we're ever going to see Andrade Charlo. I just seriously doubt that. Yeah, wow. I mean, Andrade is a difficult style for either Charlo. I've followed the Charlo's career from the very beginning. Called some of their fights when they were 9-0 and 10-0, and movers always bothered them. And both guys. And I hold Jermall in the highest regard, but I'm not sure he beat Demetrius Hopkins. I was ringside for that, and I did the international broadcast for that. And Hopkins gave him fits. And Hopkins was not a great fighter, but he was a good technician. He was crafty, not afraid to make a fight boring or ugly. And he gave Charlo fits. I don't know if you guys can find that fight on YouTube, but it's always been that way for both Charlos. If you know, boxers give them trouble. Boxers with nimble feet give them trouble. They'd much rather fight warriors. And I love that because I like watching both guys fight. I like their temperament. I like their fiery attitudes, even their negative attitudes towards the media. I don't mind. I just stay out of their way. So, yeah, I don't get any of that vitriol. But, you know, I think they know Andrade is a difficult style. He doesn't bring much to the table. He doesn't even bring a title now, you know, now that we're talking about super middleweight. So I think Demetrius Andrade's best bet for a big fight is if David Benavidez beats Caleb Plant. I think Benavidez has that kind of mentality where he will fight anybody, and he does want names. He does want scalps on his resume. He's still young. He's still hungry, even though he's been around forever. He started boxing very young, just like his brother. I think he would take that fight. And I think it's kind of 50. If Plant beats Benavidez, and I don't count Plant out in that matchup. I think it is pretty even. If Plant wins, it's sort of, I think that's 50-50 if he fights Andrade this year. I think he would eventually fight Andrade if Andrade made enough of a case for himself, but he's just not going to fight Andrade because Andrade wants that fight, if you know what I mean. So I think Boo Boo needs to cross his fingers and hope and pray that David Benavidez beats Plant, because I think Benavidez would take that fight just because he has that mentality to where he'll fight anybody. And it doesn't matter to him what kind of style he fights. because he's a pressure fighter and a volume puncher. And he believes with his size and his punch output and his physical strength that he can just overwhelm any style.
Gotcha. Dave, what do you think? Do you think that Demetrius Andrade could get a big fight by the end of the year, or do you think that it's going to be pretty much more the same with him?
I'm going to go in the opposite direction. I don't think he's going to get these big names. They've avoided him. They have no interest in him. He has very little star power. Eddie Hearn cut him loose. I think the big move at PBC for him, and I already see people in the chat saying that this is unlikely, but I think he needs to go after David Morrell.
I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you that because that guy would fight him tomorrow.
Because David Morrell's skill set is incredibly impressive. He's the young lion in the division with the brightest star. And Andrade has been trying to tell people and tell the whole world, look, I'm the incredible talent. This is why people don't want to fight me. So fight the youngest version, the young version of who you claim to be, and take his secondary title. And you'll see your star power rise, because I think David Morrell's unstoppable. I think he's probably got the highest ceiling of the PBC 168 bunch.
Gotcha.
Really quick, this is the issue with Andrade and a lot of fighters in boxing, right? I understand they want the big payday, they want to fight. Well, why not? Of course, I'm not blaming them for that, but I just don't like it when they sit around and they say things like nobody wants to fight me, because there is guys that would fight you. Right. It's just that you don't want to take the risk that you say guys at Canelo don't want to take against you. Right. I mean, that's really what it is. Like Morale will fight this guy. Right. But he doesn't want to take that risk because he's looking at the risk reward thing. But don't stand there in front of us saying nobody wants to fight me, while guys like Morale are saying, ooh, me, I'll fight you. Anybody? See, nobody wants to fight me. I'll fight you. Like, there are guys that want to fight you. Okay. They do exist. There's a lot of boxers on the planet, and many of them will fight you because to them, you are a name that they could take on. Maybe you're the fighter that they need a shot against to propel themselves to the next level as far as, attention or whatever. So there are guys that will fight Andrade. It's just that he's more comfortable fighting. I mean, I hate to say it, but safe fights.
Yeah.
All those guys around 160 and 168 have had Canelo derangement syndromes for a couple of years now. And they need to realize that Canelo is out of the PBC business for calendar year 2023. It's likely going to be Ryder. It's likely going to be Bivol in September. So there's no PBC fight for Canelo in 23. So these guys need to get something moving this calendar year.
Do you guys think that Andrade made a mistake by vacating that WBO title at middleweight? Do you think he should have fought Janibek? And now that he doesn't have a title, do you think he kind of weakened his position in terms of getting a big fight? Think he kind of lost ground by doing that? What do you think, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, real quick, and I've spoken about that too, is you watch Janibek fight, just like you watch Herzog fight, and you watch these guys fight, and it's not just those two guys. It's a lot of guys they build up as the boogeyman, and you watch them fight, and you're like, those guys look kind of pedestrian in that fight. Like, I watched him fight Zhang Herzog, and I'm like, why did 6 or 7 guys avoid that fight? There may be more to it, I don't know, but I watched Janibek fight his last fight, and it may just be a one-off. I like Janibek, but I watch it fight, and I say, Boo Andrade could have won both those. He avoided him twice. He avoided Zach Parker twice. And I watched Zach Parker fight John Ryder. I'm like, those were all winnable fights for Boo Andrade if he would have fought him, right? And they could have boosted his resume and got him bigger name fights, but he didn't fight him. That's how risk averse this guy is.
Yeah. They overthink. They overthink it.
Yeah.
They have matchmaker or manager syndrome. They're thinking more like managers or matchmakers than fighters. And they would actually serve their careers better by thinking like fighters. And that, like I say, that's something I like about David Benavidez, is he has the mentality of a fighter. And a lot of the new generation of boxers, it's like they don't like that. They don't want to have that mentality. They don't want to be thought of as like just fighters. They want to be thought of as businessmen or managers or whatever. But they tend to overthink things to a point where I think it's to the detriment of their development or their progress or their career status. Because I agree with you guys. I think I think Andrade on a good night beats Janibek and beats Parker and beats a lot of guys, but they're thinking about, well, what's the easy money? Like, okay, I've got this WBO strap and Eddie Hearn has promised me this much money, per title fight, and it doesn't matter who the opponent is. So it's like, okay, well, let's go with, let's take the road of least resistance. But that's not how stars are made. And that's not how stars are made if you've got a gold medal, right? Like people think Oscar De La Hoya was a star as soon as he turned pro because he was the 1992 Olympic gold medalist and he's a good-looking kid. He's bilingual. Whatever. He taps, he's got crossover appeal. All of that was true, but he still had to fight the right fights to become the star that he eventually became by the end of the 90s. It's not like he was a pay-per-view attraction right out of the gate as soon as he turned pro. He had to be developed, but he also had to take these risky fights on a number of platforms before he reached that pound for pound and pay-per-view level. And I think guys don't understand that. And the same could be said for Floyd Mayweather. Stars are made by taking the right fights, and that includes risky fights. And you can go back to my boyhood idol, Sugar Ray Leonard. He had to have those two fights with Roberto Duran. He had to have that. He had to have that showdown with Thomas Hearns. Even before those fights, he had to, his world title, his first world title shot was against an unbeaten Wilfred Benitez. That was a risky fight. And he didn't look great in that fight. He didn't dominate that fight, but those are the fights you have to take. And that's how stars were made. And I think the new generation has forgotten that. And it's too bad, because if these guys had more confidence in themselves and weren't just about making the easy, high 6-figure and low 7-figure payday, they could be making a lot more money. And I truly believe that.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's why I don't think we'll see an Andrade versus Morrell, because I think for Team Andrade, they're like, well, if we're going to fight somebody like David Morrell, we got to get paid. And I don't know if the money's there for that fight, because Morrell's not a household name. You know what I mean? I mean, hardcore fans know who he is, but let's face it, this is a guy who fights. He's a Cuban fighter who's fighting in Minnesota at the Minneapolis Armory. Like, I think
that live gate did about 51,000, 61,000.
Yeah, but here's the thing: when you make the ceiling a 6-digit payday or a low 7-digit payday, when that's the ceiling, it's kind of hard to convince these fighters to take risks, because they'd say things like, well, I should be incentivized for taking that big risk right there. I'm already getting I'm a 25-1 favorite, and I'm getting paid $700,000 to fight Joe Schmo over here. Well, you better triple that, or at least pay me 10 times the amount if you want me to take the risk. Where the sport needs to, and I don't even know how they could do this, but they need to start incentivizing risk. They need to start incentivizing, you take the bigger challenge, then you get paid more. That's just the way it needs to go. And there's just something broken right now. And I know there is, because I saw Devin Haney do an interview last week where he was talking about Ray Leonard and Duran and fighters of the past fighting for, he said, crumbs. Like, he has this perception that these guys were not getting paid.
He's deluded.
I went back, I did the inflation.
He's misinformed and he's deluded.
But here's the thing. And I call it this. This is my wording. So Devin Haney was making subsidized money on the zone. That's what he was making. Okay. Yeah. Whereas Ray Leonard was making generated money. That's what he generated.
Right.
So there's a difference. And if I don't count inflation, he still made more than you.
Yeah, he made a lot of money.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Listen. Leonard wasn't making a guaranteed 7-figure purse fighting dangerous guys like Andy Price. Right? Like legit top contenders, right? Guys like Andy Price or even Floyd Mayweather Sr., right? Who was a legit contender, difficult style, dangerous dude to fight, especially for an up-and-comer. He wasn't making great money fighting those guys, but he was fighting on network television. He was fighting on ABC. And so he was building his name and learning, by the way. He was learning. And during these years, 1978, 1979, and you kids at home can go to BoxRec and see how many times he fought in those years. He was fighting often and he was learning his craft to where when he finally did step up to that truly world-class elite level against the Wilfred Benitez, he was ready to assume the throne. Now, from that point on, you know, Ray Leonard versus the great Roberto Duran, man, he was making $10 million, 1980 money.
Jesus.
That's a lot of money, bro.
That's
$10
million.
You're not clipping coupons with those paydays, Dougie.
That's
Okay.
$29 million if you factor in inflation.
Thank you. Yeah. So somebody needs to explain this to Devin Haney. But it ain't just Devin Haney because, listen, it's like, I mean, it's Devin, like, and this is, I'm not picking on Eddie Hearn, but Eddie Hearn, broke into the U.S. market with a new platform, DAZN, that has, a fat cat, a major venture capitalist behind it. Some whatever Ukrainian oligarch that's got, he's a billionaire, so he got the money and he's willing to spend hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever. So he's able to sign these American fighters. Because listen, Hearn wants to break into the American market, so he's like, okay. And actually, he signed even before DAZN with HBO. He signed Daniel Jacobs, and he was overpaying Daniel Jacobs. Jacobs made off well, and these other guys see that, and so they're like, well, shoot, I want what Danny Jacobs was making fighting these guys, And if I get a shot at Canelo, I want to make what Danny Jacobs made, or I want to make what Sergey Kovalev made, or what have you. But guys like Tevin Farmer, he got a belt. What, it was the IBF junior lightweight belt. His minimum was $500,000. And that's a lot. That's a lot. That buys a lot of groceries.
I'll take it.
He was, think about that. I mean, Tevin Farmer, not a household name. Maybe as Bert Sugar used to say, he's not a household name in his own household.
I love that one.
He's making $500,000.
So Doug, I want to add
more than that. Yeah,
I want to add a caveat to what you're saying. I kind of want your thoughts on this, Doug. Just I'll be really quick. So I've always said this, and it goes back to the budgets. And like Hearn, for example, he was given a budget and he started spending a lot of money and giving money to fighters. And a lot of fans will say things, and on the surface it sounds right, but they'll say things like, well, I'm pro fighters, so the more money the fighters make, I'm all for it. And look, I want fighters to get paid too. But I don't believe, and me and Calix have talked to this at nauseum doing podcasts together. It's not pro fighter when you overpay fighters because that's money off of the table.
I was about to say that if you're overpaying them, you're fucking up the market. If you're overpaying them to the extent where they don't want to step into the ring unless they're making $1 million, right? Well, then they're never going to fight. They're going to fight maybe once a year, and that's what we have right now. And we barely have a sport. And by we, I'm talking about the U.S. scene, because I'd say boxing's healthy in Japan. You know what I mean? I'd say boxing's healthier in the U.K. than it is in the U.S. I'm just going to speak on behalf of the U.S. scene. The American boxing market is fucked up. It's broken.
It is. And
if the fighters don't want to fight, we don't have a sport.
Yeah.
And a guy like me, listen, a guy like me, born in 1970, right, starts following boxing with Muhammad Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard in the 70s, and became a hardcore fan during the 80s, right? Started covering the sport by the mid 90s, and I'll tell you what, the 90s were very healthy. Okay. I can't get excited over Twitter beefs. I can't get excited over boxing fiefdoms. I can't get excited over tribalism among the media, among the quote unquote new media. I don't care about individuals and groups that are fans of particular promotional outfits. I can't get excited about it. I really can't. I don't care to talk about it. I don't care to tweet about it. I definitely don't want to write about it. And that's not something to watch. That's not a spectator sport, watching fans and media go at it over, who should be included in a mythical rankings, right? Pound for pound list, or who should make more money or whatever, or who's going to fight who or who would win in a fight that may never happen. Like, I refuse to talk about Terrence Crawford versus Errol Spence. I don't give a fuck. And I said this last year. I said, if the fight don't happen in 2022, I'm through with it. I'm done. I don't give a shit. And that's bad. That's bad for this sport. When that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about fights that have actually happened in the ring in recent months, or fights that are actually going to happen in the ring in the upcoming months. That's a bad thing.
Gotcha.
Is there a way? My fear is we've taken an off ramp and there's no way back on. Is there a way to get away from?
There's always a way, Callis. Don't give up.
Is it reality to say no more high minimums, no more promoter working exclusively with network, and we get back to business as usual as we knew it, to where we can? The new media does not want to hear this, and I've been preaching about this for at least a year. Every show on the podcast is, you can only build stars the traditional way, and we've gotten away from the traditional way. You have to go through fire. You have to do legacy before currency. It hurts my heart when I see Floyd say currency before legacy, when Floyd was the Ring Magazine Fighter of the Year 2 years into his career. He fought 6 times, wins a legit belt against Canelo Hernandez, and then defends it 2 months later against Angel Manfredi.
Yes.
He took the tough route.
He did.
He's encouraging these guys to go against that.
Yeah, but I don't think Floyd values or understands what that foundation the Top Rank did for him, right?
Yeah.
I don't think he understands that's the big reason why he got the Oscar De La Hoya fight in the first place.
I bet you he would change his tune now if somebody that he trusts or whatever, if he could talk about it openly now, I think he would. I think he would admit, you know what? I became who I became because I was fighting often, and I was tested early in my career. I was tested when I was 21. When I was 22 years old, I was fighting dangerous fights. I was fighting, dangerous fights in 98, in 2001, when he, early in 2001, when he took on Diego Corrales, right? Fought 3 times that year. You fight Corrales, Famoso Hernandez, and Jesus Chavez. Mm-hmm. I mean, he wasn't fighter of the year that year, but he was a candidate. I think Bernard Hopkins won that year because he won the middleweight tournament and became the undisputed middleweight champion. But that's how stars are made. That's how they used to be made. And that holds true for, today. And for folks who say, well, I'm pro fighter, I want them to get paid as much money for as little risk as possible. I say, listen, I don't want to hear that unless you are that boxer's manager. Because if you really look at it, these fighters, they're not happy. They're not happy fighting, even the ones who are making money and live in mansions and have tons of ice, and lots of jewelry, and they've got a fleet of cars and SUVs or whatever, and they've got a basketball court in their house, and they got a gun range in the backyard and all this. They're not happy fighting once a year. They're agitated. They're angry at the media, even media that kisses their ass. Like the Charlos go off on everybody, man. They're mad. You know what I mean? They're not sad. When you're a happy person, you don't attack the ones you love. Let's look at Gervonta Davis, right? He's packing arenas. He's making good money. He's got all these material things, but he's not something. You're not attacking your loved ones. You're not acting crazy outside of the ring if you are satisfied with yourself, with your career, with where you are in life.
That dude's going in.
That says something that these dudes are mad and they're agitated all the time. They're getting into it with other fighters, when they're attending fights, other people's fights, right? And they're getting into it, whatever. Either Charlo getting into it with with Benavidez or whatever, while they're attending somebody else's fight. It's like, yeah, these dudes, they're young. They're in their 20s. They need to stay active. They need to give them a reason to train. You know what I mean? They need an outlet for these emotions. And these guys are like, fighters are born. Most fighters are born, not made. Like, it's the rare individual that can be a fighter and be successful and get in there and take punches and deliver punches and thrive under that pressure. And I would say, like a Tank Davis, he is one of those individuals. He's a born fighter. Like, even like a young Mike Tyson, no matter how chaotic his personal life got, when he was in his prime, step into that ring and he's ready to do damage. He's ready to take apart a Michael Spence or whoever. It does catch up with you if you're burning the candle at both ends or whatever, but you can tell a lot of these guys, and I'm not picking on PBC fighters either, because it's fighters with young fighters with other promotional outfits they're agitated and unhappy and wanting to jump ship, or they're getting into shit outside of the sport, outside of the gym and outside of the ring. They're being paid well. So obviously that's not the answer. There's more to it than being paid well and having material things. These guys are boxers, not just by choice. They're fighters by nature. They've been competitors since they were kids at the amateur level, and now they're pros. And I think they want to be challenged. I think they want to fight more often. And honestly, the industry, the infrastructure as it exists right now, the business model of boxing is broken because it's not allowing them to fight as often as they need to. And it's not allowing them to fight the level of opposition that I believe a lot of them actually want to fight, and for some guys, it's kind of ruining their hunger. There are guys who could fight tougher opposition. They've become complacent. And that's not a good thing either.
Gotcha. Shout out to Drew with the 199 super chat. He said, "What's happening at Golden Boy, Exodus, and Leo?" I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, I mean, the word is that Robert Diaz has been their longtime matchmaker and a high level executive within Golden Boy has parted ways. From what I understand, is they just didn't renew his contract. Okay. So it wasn't like he was fired or that he was quit. It was kind of like it's a parting of ways.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there's a huge exodus from Golden Boy. Now it doesn't mean that there haven't been others who have been let go, but I don't know about anybody else on the executive level that's been let go. I haven't heard that. I don't know of. I mean, I had a phone conversation with one of the executives today, and he sounded good, and he sounded like he still got a job, and the company's still. So we're talking about, we were talking about doing some things like creating some content, studio content or whatever, and he sounded good. So Golden Boy Promotions for a long time was one of the biggest, if not the biggest. By biggest, I mean it had the most employees, boxing organizations in the world. I think probably only Matchroom would equal or exceed the number of employees that Golden Boy Promotions had for a long time. And quite frankly, the game is not healthy enough to sustain that. Like, they've had to downsize, just like a lot of companies had to downsize. I mean, there was a time where Main Events was one of the biggest freaking companies in the sport, and they survive. They continue today, but there came a time like 10 or 15 years ago where they had to seriously downsize. And I think it's that way for every company, at least US based, because like we've been talking about, the American scene just isn't vibrant. It isn't healthy enough. And the way it's set up right now with the platform network exclusivity, it's just hard. You can't do high level co-promotions on a regular basis the way promoters used to be able to do when HBO was cutting the biggest check in boxing, right? Followed by Showtime. It used to be like they could develop their own, each boxing promotion, whether it was Don King or Main Events or Top Rank, could develop their own star, right? Let's say with Don King, it would be Felix Trinidad, right? And with Top Rank, it would be the Golden Boy. It would be Oscar De La Hoya. And with Main Events, it would be a Fernando Vargas and an Ike Corte. And they could build them on their own, just kind of fighting in-house and fighting unattached guys to a point where and HBO was on board to build them up and give them that exposure and cut that fat check, knowing that when the time came, we could see an Oscar De La Hoya versus Ike Corte, or a De La Hoya versus Felix Trinidad, right? Or Fernando Vargas versus Ike Corte, and Fernando Vargas versus Felix Trinidad, and eventually a Fernando Vargas versus Oscar De La Hoya, right? You look at, from 1999 to 2002, you see all these fights happening, and they're sensational. And these are co-promotions. These are Don King, Top Rank, Main Event co-promotions that were, pay-per-view, HBO pay-per-view, and it made dollars, so it made sense, and it's not like that right now. And because it's not like that right now, these guys aren't able to sign as many fighters or to keep on contract as many fighters as they had in previous years or previous decades. And until the business rights itself and fixes it, until it gets fixed, I think you're going to see a lot of U.S. promoters downsize. They can't afford to have 20 to 30 people on staff. And at one time, Golden Boy had 30 plus people full time.
Gotcha. Jesse Quesada with the $4.99 super chat says, with Robert Diaz and Gomez leaving Golden Boy and rumors.
I don't know about Gomez. I don't know about Eric Gomez leaving Golden Boy. That's a rumor.
Then he says, with rumors of Golden Boy going under, where do their marquee fighters like Virgil Ryan go?
Oh, damn, Quesada, man, he's going.
He's going all the way. He's going TMZ. He's going National Enquirer, man.
Yeah, they're still in business, man. But I mean, listen, I've heard about Probellum having problems, right? Like they're out of money or whatever. And when that happens, and years ago there was an outfit called Forum Boxing that was owned by Dr. Jerry Buss, same guy who owned the Lakers and owned what was called the Great Western Forum at that time, and he also owned the hockey franchise out here or whatever. But Dr. Jerry Buss loved boxing, so he had a promotional company, and they did really well for a long time, most of the 90s, and they developed future Hall of Famers like Mark Too Sharp Johnson and the Marquez brothers, Juan Manuel and Rafael, and Marco Antonio Barrera. I think they developed Carlos Famoso Hernandez, a lot of guys, man. They were really good at what they did, but they were mostly kind of like a regional, Southern California boxing promotional operation. And when Dr. Buss was like, whatever, was done with it, and was ready to focus on other things, and the Lakers were moving on to Staples Center and all. They basically liquidated, not entirely. They stayed a promotional company behind Marco Antonio Barrera because he was still their brightest star, even at the start of the new century, even at going into the 2000s. But basically they sold the contracts to the Marquez brothers. I think the Marquez brothers went to Top Rank. The Marquez brothers and maybe a few others, maybe Hector Quiros and a few other Mexican fighters went over to Top Rank, and I think Too Sharp Johnson, he might have gone to DeBella, DeBella's new promotional, or what was then his new promotional company or whatever. But yeah, the contracts get sold off and they get a piece. They get like they get a piece of
if the fighters are good
it's
enough, they'll
kinda
find
like
a home.
management, like a management company or whatever.
Yeah. Shout out to Drew again with the $5 super chat. He says, Calix, the way to get back to it being a sport is the platforms giving less annual budgets to promoters, and it's already happening. Well, we'll see. We'll see how that works out.
The networks, I think, need to work with more promoters. Period.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. It just doesn't work to have no matter how deep the promotional stable is. It's just in the nature of the promoters and the management. If they're just with one network, and if there's going to be guaranteed purses or whatever, there's no incentive for the fighters to fight
why
often.
Why not just sell why not just sell fights? Like, we're Fox, we got this much money, we'll buy fights.
That was the lesson that Showtime learned. Showtime was exclusive to Don King when Don King got pissed off at HBO and took Mike Tyson and Julio Cesar Chavez and his giant freaking stable, which included Frank Warren's stable too. Frank Warren's deep British stable. And for a while, Showtime had amazing programming on par or even better than HBO's boxing programming, but most of their top fights were regulated to Don King's pay-per-view cards, especially when Mike Tyson was in jail. And those are those now legendary stacked pay-per-view cards, the Revenge, the rematches. There was one called what was it called? It's called American something, American Splendor or whatever it was. They were stacked cards. These were these cards that were headlined by Julio Cesar Chavez, and they would have Julian Jackson and Felix Trinidad and Terry Norris in good fights. You know what I mean? The best fights that you can imagine. But meanwhile, on regular Showtime, they were getting Drek. They were getting Frankie Lyles versus whoever. You know what I mean? They were getting, whatever, John David Jackson against whoever. You know what I mean? They wasn't the best against the best. And that shouldn't have been that way because Don King had an amazing stable or whatever. But when it came to just those regular Showtime licensing fees, Don King wasn't going to come out of the pocket. And that's any promoter. They're like, okay, if you give me this healthy licensing fee, I'm just going to use that licensing fee to, cover the fighters and I'm going to save a little bit for myself and, I'm going to keep the gate or whatever. But unless I'm getting paid, extra, I'm not going to make that super fight. I'm not going to put my best fighters against each other unless I'm getting paid something extra. And that's one thing I will say for a number of years, HBO's model, they had a lot, they had a huge budget. I mean, at one time they were getting, they had $100 million per year budget or whatever. They could make excellent fights just on regular HBO, but they would put pressure on these promoters to make the big fights, make the dream fights, and that those fights were the fights that were featured on HBO pay-per-view. And that model made fight fans. Like they had strong enough fights on HBO and even the Boxing After Dark series where they weren't dealing with the glamour divisions. They were dealing with sub welterweights and sub lightweights and even sometimes sub featherweights, but the fights were so good and they paid enough to where these, featherweights or bantamweights would fight the best featherweights and bantamweights out there. Or, in the case of Gotti Ward, junior welterweights, but the fights were so sensational, it made fight fans. And then, fight fans are following those fighters and, You know, if it made sense, if they could build those fighters up into a pay-per-view fights, then that's what we got. And the pay-per-views did well enough to where everybody made money. I think boxing needs that. It needs a platform like an HBO to say, listen, we'll cut you a check, but we're not exclusive to anybody. And we're not going to cut that check unless the matchup is good. And kudos to the programmers, like Lou DiBella, who was with HBO until 2000, or the late Jay Larkin, who was with Showtime, who finally said, I think at the end of the 90s, he was like, no more exclusive contracts with promoters. After that experience with Don King, he was like, I think his motto was great fights, no rights. And he said, listen, we can't cut a check as big as HBO, but we want good fights, and we'll pay a healthy licensing fee, but we're not going to go crazy. And you promoters got to work together. And I think that worked out. I think, for at least the first half of the 2000s, there's some excellent fights that Showtime gave us. And in many cases, they gave American fans their first look at guys like Prince Nassim Hamed or, Vitaly Klitschko or Felix Trinidad. And I'm going back to like the late 90s as well as the early. I'm going back to the mid 2000s or whatever. But Showtime was that hardcore fans platform because they would on tape delay show those big time British fights, like Nigel Benn and Chris Eubank and Joe Calzaghe as well.
Gotcha. So let's move on to the next topic here. I know we talked about this earlier about Eimantas Stanionis underwent emergency appendectomy surgery. I think it was last week, and they're saying he the recovery period is like 6 to 8 weeks. And we already talked about the fight with Virgil Ortiz being postponed, but there's no date mentioned for rescheduling. And what does Virgil Ortiz do? Does he wait? Or will he fight someone else in the interim? D-Star, what do you think happens here? You think he should take another opponent? Because it seems unsure and unlikely on when Stanionis is going to be able to return.
Look, first, I wish Stanionis a quick recovery. It's a real serious surgery, but if it's taken care of, it's safe and has a high success rates. But nonetheless, I wish him the best. It's a fight I'm looking forward to. Look, if the Ortiz camp feels like, look, we can't wait, we don't want to be too rusty. This surgery could cause a postponement longer than expected. You never know. If they want to do it, I support them in that. But if they could do the fight like April, May-ish, you know what I mean? I think it's worth just waiting a little bit because it's a fight I want to see. I think this is the test we've been waiting for Virgil to take on. I'm a big fan of Virgil Ortiz. I'm a big fan of Stanionis. I think it's a fight fans fight. I think it's going to be a great fight. I just hope it happens next. But I understand if it doesn't happen next at the same time, but that's what I got.
Yeah, because if he takes the recovery period, he probably won't be able to start training until like the last week in February.
Yeah.
So it's like, how long does Ortiz wait for him? That's the thing. Dave, what do you think Ortiz should do? You think he should wait, or you think he should get an interim fight in between? What are your thoughts?
I think he should wait. It's a title shot, right? There's a secondary title on the line here. This is a big fight that we're all anxious to see him test some skills against somebody worthy to be in the ring with him. And let's just be real. The appendix surgery isn't a major deal. If you know anyone who's had a C-section, it's the recovery time is similar, but that means no heavy cardio. That means no abdominal work. So yeah, his training camp's going to have to be pushed back. But even if it's 8 weeks, why start a camp to fight a tune-up? If you're Virgil Ortiz, why go into camp to fight a tune-up fight, stay busy fight, and then postpone this world title opportunity? It doesn't make sense to me at all. I think he should wait the 8 weeks that the gentleman will probably need.
Gotcha. Calix, you think he should hold off, or you think he should get a fight in between?
No, I highly disagree. I think he should fight. He should stay on this March 18th date. I'm not going to pretend to know the economics of it. So as long as they can make this work economically, scale it down, stay on the March 18th date. Virgil Ortiz fought once in 2022, fellas. So we can't mess around. Like if I'm his team, I don't mess around with this and trust that this is going to work. And then we could do May, and then maybe May turns into July. He had a mess of a 2022. I think 2023, you got to be active. They said they wanted to fight 3 times this year. Fight 3 times this year. Get your fight in. Tell Stanionis, look, May, June, we'll be ready. Stay sharp. This is what we're talking about. Like as boxing fans who have followed this sport for a while, we've seen this happen a million times before, is just stay ready. Just fight. You're a fighter. Fight. So stay on that March 18th date as long as you can make it work economically.
Yeah. Dougie, I know we talked. Yeah, so we talked about activity, Dougie. So you think you on board with Calix here? You think he should get an interim fight?
Keep that date. Keep that March 18 date. Fight anywhere. I mean, but yeah, if you can fight in Texas, in and around your home region, do it. I mean, that's how you build a fan base. That's how you stay on weight. I mean, that was the secret to a lot of these fighters. Guys like James Toney. I mean, even when he was a champion, he had a lot of non-title fights. And that was the beauty of the business back then, is you had other platforms where a guy like, Shane Mosley or even a great fighter like Julio Cesar Chavez or a future great like James Toney, where they could fight lesser opponents on like a basic cable. And maybe they don't fight at the championship weight, especially James Toney. He'd fight at the Auburn Hills, what was it? What was the name of that venue? It's in Auburn Hills.
Was that the Ice
Palace? Yeah, the Palace.
Yeah, let's say Palace.
Yeah, and that would be he'd be fighting at like, light heavyweight or whatever. Like tough guy, but whatever. Not a ranked contender, but just a solid dude. And these would be ESPN or fights on USA Tuesday Night Fights. Yeah. And then, whatever, a month or two later, you'd see him on HBO defending the IBF super middleweight title. And he'd be making 7 figures for that fight. You know what I mean? But he was staying busy and staying in the public eye. And the same thing with Chavez. He would have his, 2 or 3 title fights a year. But in between those fights, he was fighting once or twice in whatever, some part of Mexico. And you could watch those fights on Univision. Or whatever, or maybe they weren't televised in the U.S., but whatever. Yeah. He was fighting. And he wasn't making 140, or 135 or whatever, he was, and he wasn't necessarily in the best shape for those guys either. But there was fan service. There were local fans that were flocking to see the great Julio Cesar Chavez fight. And, he was making fans, and if it was televised in the U.S., then okay, even better. But I mean, he's staying in the public eye, he's, staying in the media's eye. And most importantly, he's fine tuning his craft. They're working on things. They're staying busy so he doesn't get too heavy in between the world title fights. And I think we need to return to that. So no, I'm in favor of especially a young fighter. That's ridiculous. Guys like Stanionis and Ennis and Ortiz fighting just once a year. Come on, that's ridiculous. It's bad for them, really. And for fans who say no, it's good for them because they're taking less damage. No, they're taking damage because they have to get into fighting shape by sparring more between fights. The longer they wait between fights, if they're not getting heavy between rounds, whatever, they still have to hone their skills and they still have to get their fighters' timing by sparring. And you take damage in sparring, man. I know this for a fact. I've seen it. I've been around the game long enough. I know this. I know fighters that are punchy today, not from their fights in the ring, but from the rounds of sparring that they did. Yeah. So it's not good. It's you spar less, the more active you are. So I'm in favor of Ortiz fighting at least 3 times this year. And the earlier he can fight this year, the better. If he has a date, if he has a March 18 date, stay on it and fight whoever.
Yeah, it's a great point you made, Dougie, too, because if you have to play catch up in the gym, then that's worse on your body because you're out of shape And when
Yeah,
you
and
get in
Virgil's
there,
a big guy. He's a big kid.
So when you're out of shape and you're sparring, that's when you get hurt more because your reflexes aren't as sharp. You're carrying
Let me tell
more
you.
weight, and you
Hey,
can't,
let me
you
tell
can't
you.
defend yourself the way you can when you're in shape. You're right.
Let me tell you something. I was a grad student at Columbia University in New York City in 1992 and 1993 when Riddick Bowe was at his peak, really. Heavyweight champion of the world. And this dude would get so freaking out of shape. And his thing was, well, I'm going to put the plastic on and I'm going to spar the weight off. And that dude, and he was doing the rope-a-dope in sparring. And he, listen, there's a false sense of security with these guys with big gloves and you got the headgear on and all. And it's not like the eyes of the world are on you, right? So it's almost like brothers fighting each other at home, right? Sure. You're comfortable with each other. It doesn't mean it's not brutal. Doesn't mean you're not taking lumps. So I've seen Riddick Bowe buzzed, hurt in sparring, taking unnecessary punishment and sparring. He got a thick tongue. Today, and I don't think it's from he had a few tough fights, the fights with Evander Holyfield, obviously, but most of Riddick Bowe's professional fights, apart from the Holyfield fights and the 2 DQ victories over Andrew Galata, he really didn't take a lot of punishment in the ring.
Yeah, he did.
His punishment was in the gym, was in blowing up in weight between fights and basically having a fat camp, having that plastic on all the time in the gym, and sparring crazy amounts of rounds to not just, to get the weight off, but also just to get back into fighting shape. Yeah. That did not serve him well. And there's a lot of fighters that are like that.
Yeah, that's what, when I was in Vegas a couple months ago, that's what Steve Kim brought up. He said these fighters are so inactive that the first couple weeks of training camp are fat camp. It's just fat camp.
Yeah, you're right.
Dougie, this last topic may pop a blood vessel in your head, but we got to bring it up here. Spence versus Thurman.
Oh, shit.
Reportedly targeted for April at 154. This seems like kind of a weird fight to me. I don't want to sound horribly negative about this, but this is a very insignificant fight to me at 154, man.
And the thing is I like Errol Spence. I love watching Errol Spence fight. He doesn't fight often enough. I was a huge Keith Thurman fan. I was a huge Keith Thurman fan when he was a prospect 10 years ago. All right, 10, 11 years ago when he was a prospect. One of my favorite fighters, one of my favorite interviews. But this dude has been a part-time fighter ever since he unified welterweight belts back in what was that, like early 2017? Yeah. And I got to be honest with you, that's when an Errol Spence Keith Thurman fight made sense. 2017, that's when Thurman unified welterweight belts, and a couple months later, Errol Spence traveled to Sheffield, England, and won the IBF title from a still dangerous Kell Brook. And really, like the fall of like November of 2017, that would have been an awesome fight. That fight would have made either fighter. That would have given them tremendous momentum going into 2018 and 2019. Instead, Thurman doesn't fight at all in 2018, right? And then who does Spence wind up fighting? Like Lamont Peterson and who else? I don't even know. Some mandatory or whatever. But no, I mean, honestly, this fight would have been an awesome fight before Errol Spence won his first world title. If Keith Thurman could have defended his first welterweight title against Errol Spence in 2016, that would have meant something. That would have been a tremendous fight. That could have been a fight series. They could have had a damn trilogy between 2016 and 2019. Think about that, Now, like 2023, and it's not even at welterweight. There's no titles on the line. They're fighting at 154. Spence, I can see Spence carrying 154 pounds. He's got the frame for junior middleweight. I don't think Keith Thurman does.
Yeah. Yeah, he fought
just
at
doesn't
154 a few times, but he's too small for it, I think, too.
Yeah.
Dave, what are your thoughts on this fight at 154?
Meaningless. And by the way, I just saw Errol Spence in Las Vegas when he was on that being interviewed on Showtime for the Showtime card, and he did look heavy. Yeah, I don't know how much of that it's Photoshop, people going around, but I saw him with my own eyes, and he looked heavy. So vacate the belts. It's time for the WBC to ask him to relinquish the belts and give these young lions an opportunity to fight for them.
Yeah. Shout out to Jesse Casada again with the $4.99 super chat. He said PBC and Schaefer got a backdoor deal for Ennis and Stanionis. He said Spence moving up, vacating belts. Ennis and Eimantas getting elevated to IBO champs.
I hope he's right.
That's hilarious.
I hope he's right, man. I hope his intel is good. Ennis, I'll take it, man. Ennis Stanionis, man, that's a good fight.
Yeah. Shout out to Ellie Boxing with the $4.99 super chat. She says Spence versus Thurman apparently makes sense, but these PB sexuals got a problem with Canelo fighting John Ryder in London. Your thoughts, Beeb? Well, I mean, I don't know what to tell you about that one. I don't. The Ryder fight's okay. I mean, I don't hate it, but I like that one better than this Thurman fight. I'll be honest with you. I'll tell you that. So,
me too.
Yeah. Calix, your favorite topic. Keith Thurman, what's up?
And you and I follow boxing odds like the stock market. So I saw today opened up on DraftKings. Errol Spence is an 8.5 to 1 favorite. Opened up against Keith Thurman. 8.5 to 1. So this is a microcosm of boxing power brokers and how they move currently, particularly the power broker running the welterweight division for a while now. This was, as Dougie pointed out, a fight that was very much in demand 5-6 years ago, and it's very much not in demand in 2023. But we didn't get it when it was in demand in 2017, and we're getting it when it's not in demand in 2023. I mean, what else do I have to say? 8.5 to 1 favorite. And the worst part about this is 154. They worked so hard to get Keith, even though he hasn't won a meaningful fight in the weight in 6 years. They worked so hard to get him at the top of the mandatory rankings, only go to 154 with this fight. So, like I said, I just want to see these belts either be vacated or stripped. See, because when Errol Spence fights at 147 again, it will be what, a year and a half? And we have too many fighters allowed to do this. Leo Santa Cruz wasn't even a featherweight for 3 years, and he was allowed to sit on this belt. And Jermall Charlo, how long is he going to be able to keep this belt at 160? We need to, in particular, make the sexy division sexy again. Welterweight and middleweight are dumpster juice divisions, to where the top of those divisions are not doing anything. There's no movement. So I want to see the sanctioning bodies try to get and create movement. Let these belts fall. Let the vacuum happen, and let guys like Vergil, Stanionis, Boots, Cody Crowley, Conor Ben, if he comes back, let those guys, Butayev, get another shot. Let these guys get shots. It's a gridlock division. We have
new blood. We need new blood. Otherwise, these aren't glamour divisions. And traditionally, they were. Underneath heavyweight, middleweight, and welterweight were U.S. boxing's glamour divisions.
D-Style, you going to buy this pay-per-view if it happens?
I'm going to be honest, I probably will. But I'm like one of like the 100,000 people are going to buy it. Look, here's...
You can always call back and say the signal was fuzzy and you may get the money back.
Right. Look, there's a problem with the fight when people defending the fight are showing me highlights of Keith Thurman from 2017. There's a problem. Oh, this guy's dangerous.
That's so sad. Oh, that's so sad.
They call him one time. You know why they call him that? Look at what he did to okay, that was in 2017.
He don't have the ponytail anymore.
It's like
hairline has receded too.
Who's the guy from the Bible that they cut his hair? It wasn't the same no more.
Samson.
Samson. He's like Samson. You know what I mean? He don't have the list no more. Like he don't talk like he used to talk no more. Like he's not the same guy. Right?
It's a New Testament.
He's not. He's the wolf that got domesticated. It is what it is.
Whoa,
okay?
He does a lot of yoga.
Look. I don't like the fact that I don't like when fighters hold divisions up. Like I just don't. Like, okay, you're gonna fight at 154, then go fight at 154. Go fight Tim Tszyu, go fight Jermall, whatever you want to do. But like Thurman, what the hell's going on here? I just don't get it. We have these young lions just waiting for their shot. Like right now, you have a rival right there in Crawford. You have everything in place for your legacy, but you're gonna fight Keith Thurman at 154 pounds. Like this, I don't know what to make of this. Keith Thurman, obviously, look, he's won 2 fights since 2019 or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Like, and then he didn't look that good in both those wins anyway, in my opinion. Not to this level, not to get a title shot against Spence. Like I felt like when they had the WBC convention and the Virgil Ortiz camp was like, hey, let us fight Thurman and the winner gets Spence. I thought that was like a good deal. I thought, okay, do that fight. It's a great fight. But they don't want to take the risk, obviously, with Ortiz or whatever. Look, I'm a believer in Max Kellerman talks about this, the hierarchy in boxing. And we don't have that right now. Like these guys aren't fighting each other. It is what it is. Like, I don't know what to make of it. Yes, I'm going to buy the fight. But I also know that the general public is not interested in this fight. This is not the same Keith Thurman for 2018, guys, or 2017. It's not. It's not the same Keith Thurman. And just like Doug, I was a big fan of Keith. And Keith said all the right things when he was coming up.
Yep.
Everything. Don't duck me, son. And like when I'm champion, I don't care about the O. And I'm gonna fight everybody. And I'm not gonna protect my record. And I was excited. I was like, shit, and I believed him.
Yep.
You believe
and then
that?
he don't even have his own no more. I don't know what the hell he's protected anyway. But but now I know because they're going to reward him with a Spence fight, even though he refused to take any other challenges. Like there used to be a time in boxing that when a former champion was no longer on top, he had to take that role of like that guy that everyone expected him to be stepped over by the up-and-coming prospect or something, or the up-and-coming contender. And then that was your opportunity to prove everybody wrong and say, yo, I still got it. And then they get the title shot, right? If Keith Thurman had beaten, like, let's say he would have said, oh, this young kid, Boots wants to fight me? Okay, young buck, let's do it then. And then he beats Boots. I'm not complaining right now.
Right.
Like, I'm not. But he doesn't want to take that risk. It's whatever. But I'm not that excited about the fight.
Yeah, me neither. Jesse Casada, man, he's got the conspiracy theories going on tonight, baby. With the 199 super chat, he says corruption between PBC and the WBA and the WBC is ruining boxing. I don't know if I want to give PBC all that credit for
And by the way, really quick, Beep, just really quick.
Go ahead.
We've had up to over 100 people on here. We got 66 likes. Hit the like button. It takes 3 seconds. Okay. I'm not asking you guys to do some manual labor right now. Just hit the like, please. Thank you.
Dougie, before we head on, I want to give you the last word, but I want to ask you this one question. I want your opinion on this. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that content creators like videographers now are going to be able to vote fighters into the Hall of Fame. Now, is that true?
Well, yeah. If the Boxing Writers Association of America is now it's not just regulated to writers, right? So you can be a content creator, you can be a videographer, but there's still, you still have to gain full membership before you're allowed to vote for the International Boxing Hall of Fame. Okay. So you have to go through, you have to, submit a bunch of samples, you have to answer a questionnaire, and there's a membership committee. And I'm one of the members. I'm on that panel.
Yeah, I know.
and the membership committee votes on whether or not you're professional enough to be a part of this professional association that is probably 100 years. It's almost as old as Ring Magazine. It's not 100 years old. It's getting there. It's close to 100 years old. Yeah. There's been one content creator so far. What's his name? Sean. Is it Zeitel or Zeitel?
Jean Sattel.
Sattel. Yeah, good guy. Been around for a while. Paid his dues. Nice young man. Is generally professional.
He's good.
Yeah, and he was. I mean, so there's no. It doesn't seem like there's a bias with the panel because I think he was unanimously voted in. So
is he the only one so far?
So far, he's the first. Yeah.
Let me throw a scenario. Let me throw a scenario at you. What if someone sends you? No, it's not about him. What if someone sends you like 10 Glovegate videos? Is that an automatic disqualification?
That person is not getting my vote.
Okay.
You know, that's all I can say about that. Yeah, I mean, if they have a YouTube channel and it's clearly about clickbait, you know, it's clearly about, or you know, if they're race baiters or if they're just instigators, they follow beefs and they fan those flames. That's not journalism.
No, not. So what if someone sends you videos of them interviewing fighters, asking them what their favorite food is? They're not getting it either, right?
No, I don't think they're going to get they're not going to get my vote. I don't think they're going to get
what their favorite rap song is, or what their favorite
I don't think they're going to get Steve Farhood's vote. I can't speak for everybody on I can't speak for anybody on the panel. Okay. I can only speak for myself. They're not getting my vote. You know,
so guys like Sattel, who I believe are warranted. Those are the types of guys that will get in.
Sean knows his shit. He knows, but he clearly has a passion for boxing. I've talked to him.
He works hard. He's a hard worker. You know, he's been with a lot of people.
He asks real questions, and sometimes those real questions gets him in hot water. And he takes the heat, and you know, he doesn't seem to be somebody who's out there trying to start shit between fighters or between fighters and media. So, you know, and it doesn't seem like he's out there just trying to get clickbait either. He seems like he's generally, he generally has a passion and interest in the sport. He knows what he knows. He wants to learn more, you know, and I think that's an integral part of being a journalist as well. Is you got to be inquisitive. You got to want to learn. And you know, to me, he hit all those notes, and I think those are the notes that you need to hit if you're a content creator who wants to be a prospective member of the Boxing Writers Association of America.
Yeah, he deserves it. He deserves it.
Yeah.
All right. So before we let you go, Dougie, let everyone know where they can find you. And do you still do those podcasts on the Ring TV YouTube channel or more? Or
no, we'll be coming up with something new. In this new year, there's a number of Ring Magazine department or features that I'd like to sort of create a video studio element or a studio version of it, like New Faces or Best I Faced or Greatest Hits, that kind of thing. Okay. So look out for that. But, you know, you can find me on my social media. It's at Dougie Fisher, DOUGIEFISCHER. It's the same handle for my Instagram. Join me on most Sundays. I hit the track at Santa Monica College with my buddy Dave Schwartz, the coach, and sometimes promoter Tom Loeffler joins us. And we just talk boxing and have fun. But obviously, ringtv.com, that's the official website for Ring Magazine. And the first digital-only version of Ring Magazine will go live on Tuesday, January 16. Okay. And that'll be free, as a matter of fact. This issue of the Ring, yeah. So that'll be our Fighter of the Year, the 2022 annual Ring Magazine Awards. Those are going to be announced tomorrow morning, and you'll be able to read most of those articles. Fighter of the Year, Fight of the Year, KO of the Year, Trainer of the Year, event of the year, prospect of the year. We're going to go live with those feature articles and those winner announcements tomorrow morning. And then for all the other awards and the other articles in the January 2023 edition, that'll go live. You can find it on ringtv.com on Tuesday, the 16th.
So
Or is it the 17th?
Okay. So Fury, if Fury Usyk end up fighting this year, is that going to be for the ring title?
Yeah, because Usyk is the Ring Magazine champion.
Usyk has the ring title now, right?
Yeah,
And
we
this-
didn't play that. We got some stick for that. People got mad at us. Like, you had no business stripping Tyson Fury. And I'm like, then Tyson he needs to be honest. Don't stop manipulating people. Don't hold the belts up for ransom. And I understand a fighter, it's emotional after a big fight, right? That defense against Dillian White in front of 94,000 fans. I get it, man. You're emotional. You're like, I've accomplished all I want to accomplish. I'm retired, right? We're not going to take you at your word right after a fight. Even if you reiterate that during the post-fight press conference, even if a week later you say, no, I'm done, I'm retired, we're going to give you some time. But this dude doubled down on it and tripled down on it and quadrupled down on it. And like almost 4 months later, on his birthday, he says, no, I'm retired. It's like, okay, man, if you're retired, you're retired. We got the number 1 and the number 2 contender. We got Usyk fighting Joshua in a rematch. If you're retired, then, and the best are fighting the best, the top 2 contenders are fighting each other, then the Ring Magazine championship should be on the line. That's our policy. So I don't feel bad at all about that. I'm like, oh, well, he came back. He fought in December. I'm like, yeah, but he was jerking everybody around for months. And knowing Tyson Fury and given his past, and by the way, I'm a Tyson Fury fan. I like the dude. I like him. But he's the kind of dude who can just bring people along for months, years even. He gives
Did you guys call him, Dougie? There's a rumor going around that you guys actually called him and asked him,
absolutely,
are you serious
and
about
said,
this?
hey, if you're truly retired, do you mind if the Ring Magazine championship is on the line? He said, I don't mind. We're like, good. So I don't even understand why his fans are mad at us. Like, I don't get it.
So he, when you called him, he said, "Go, it's okay."
I didn't call the former managing editor Tom Gray, who gets along really well with him, gave him a call, and he said, "Yeah, man, I'm retired." He's like, "Okay."
And his reasoning for doing that with people are saying, I don't know how true this is, but he wanted to win it twice, so he wanted.
I once win it 3 times.
Three times or whatever. 3 times, excuse me. So he wanted to be the only guy to win it 3 times. That's why he did it.
Hey, that's cool. Whatever works. Whatever. Listen. I'm sure that's what he means when he said it. And knowing how he is when he said he was retired and done, maybe he truly meant that. Maybe it was truly in his heart. That's just how he felt in that moment. But he's the kind of guy who's going to change his mind. But I think when he was saying he was retired, it was just, that's him saying, listen, I want people to really come out the pocket for me to fight. And, they're going to come out the pocket more if they're thinking they're taking me out of retirement. If I say, no, I'm done, fuck it. If you want me to come back, you're going to have to pay out the ass. And then that's fine. That's the business of boxing. But Ring Magazine is about the sport of boxing.
Yeah. So
and the Ring Championship is about the best fighting the best. And honestly, and no disrespect to Derek Chisora, but Tyson Fury versus Derek Chisora, that's not a championship fight. That rubber match was just that was business. That's all that was.
Yeah, it was business. So the fact that people were critical of that decision is kind of weird, because if Tyson Fury is the guy that kind of wanted it, if he's not mad, why are other people?
Yeah, why are they mad? And why are they criticizing us? I don't know. Yeah, whatever. There's some folks out there, they like to criticize the ring. It's all good. It's been around a long time. It's been criticized for 100 years. It had its detractors in the 1920s. It's got its detractors in the 2020s. It's all good. Comes with the territory.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Dougie.
Thank you for having me.
Very fun, very entertaining. Nice to catch up with you. It's been a while.
I appreciate it.
All right. And thank you guys. Oh, okay. Definitely come back. Yeah.
All right.
All right,
Okay.
Dougie. And thank you in the chat, and thank everyone for watching, and thank everyone on the panel. This is a great show, and catch you next week. Take care, everybody.